I got a theory.
Okay,
for
go
you.
for it.
Okay,
I want it.
Yeah, I want you to rip it apart if you can, because of all my searching, this is where I've landed, and as most plausible, which makes the most sense to me, of just what the hell is going on here.
Yeah.
And it came from Jesus, right? It came from these ideas of Jesus, and so what I imagine is if you go back to this idea of God being consciousness, right? And you think of it almost like a giant pool of consciousness, right? Like a big, almost like, think of how electricity is, right? How electricity just kind of is everywhere, and we can kind of generate it like out of the ether somehow and like put it in shit and it just flow. It's like this weird thing, right? But it's just where is electricity? It's just kind of in electrons everywhere. Like, what the hell is that, right? So I think imagine if consciousness is like that in property almost, right? And that's what God is this like apparatus of consciousness, and we are all connected to that, right? So our experience, we're having an experience and it's flowing into this pool, right? Somehow it's all flowing back up into this pool, and for one reason or another, there's a positive polarity and a negative polarity. And one thing that just blew my freaking mind when I read the Bible is that the most common command in the Bible is do not be afraid, right? Mm-hmm. And when you think of the opposite of love, most people think of hate. But really, it depends how you look at it, but if you look at it like, if you think of the opposite of love as being fear, right? To me, it makes a lot more sense, right? Yep. Because love is like this acceptance and expanding thing, right? It's like this accepts all kind of selfless thing. Fear is this like self-absorbed, internal, it like sucks inward, and it's rejection of something, right? And so I think imagine this pool, right? The goal, for one reason or another, beyond my pay grade, is to positively charge this pool, right? And if you think of that as the goal, all of these teachings of Jesus make so much sense, because when he says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me, because it's like, it doesn't matter what your exact experience is, it matters everyone's experience, right? And it matters filling this pool up with the positive polarity. And it makes sense when Jesus says, you are in me like I am in the Father. And it makes sense when Jesus says, when people say, what do you need for eternal life? What do you do? And he says, keep the commandments, right? And then it's like, well, what are the commandments? And it's love God and love others, right? Which is put love in the freaking thing, right? And all these other things he says, if you think of it in that way, they all make so much sense, right? And it starts making less sense as you get into the freaking things that people were saying further on in the New Testament, right? It gets a little weird with heaven and hell and the pit of fire and all this. But I do think that we're almost like these machines of experience, mining experience somehow for some reason or the other. And I also think it explains so many things for me, because when you read the Old Testament, right, you're confronted with these crazy atrocities, these genocides, all these crazy things that God does, right? You're like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? This is crazy, bro. Like, chill out, or like, what's going on? And take, for example, the genocide of the Amalekites when God says, yo, kill everyone, man, woman, child, goat, everything. Okay, now imagine this idea of the positive and negative polarity. And God being that entirety of everything. Think of it. If you're God, you're seeing through everyone's eyes, right? You're seeing through everyone. You have all the experience. So your knowledge of being all knowing, right, is that it's just, you have all the experience as to draw on. And then imagine these Amalekites, right, are spreading, because a lot of people say the Amalekites are so wicked and they're doing child sacrifice and they're doing all these crazy, horrible things, right? And that's why God wanted to eat them. Well, imagine that's true. They're putting so much fear in the pool and so much negative polarity that God, or the accumulation of all that, knows, yo, we got to stop this from happening, right? Yeah. Because it's putting too much negative polarity in there. And you can just walk it through the Bible, and that way of looking at it makes sense to me. And Jesus, when he says, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me, and you think of it, it's like, yeah, you don't matter. Everyone matters. This whole collective thing matters. pick up your cross, which would be sacrifice yourself for the good of everyone else, right? And ultimately landing at the crucifixion, it's Jesus giving the ultimate example of that reality, saying, hey, like, it's not about me. It's not about my suffering. It's not about my experience necessarily. It's about this whole thing. Wake up to that, you know? And that's almost what it seems like the thing is to me. And I'm not completely sold on that, but I don't know. Sorry, that's a lot to chew on, but I'm curious what you think about it, or what you think's wrong with that.
Oh, I mean, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I feel like what you're describing sounds very like panentheism.
Yeah.
And that's the belief that God is the universe, but he's also something beyond the universe. But at the same time, you know, you're describing God as consciousness, right? Not necessarily as physical reality. So I'm wondering what you think, what's the difference between physical reality and just in a theological perspective, not, you know, you're not a scientist, right?
Yeah.
Theological belief perspective. Do you think God created the material world? Or better yet, do you believe that the God that you believe in, consciousness say, do you think that's the same entity as whatever it is that created the universe?
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, bro, because I think with this theory, if we're just playing with ideas, the physical reality doesn't necessarily exist. Like, our reality, when we say physical reality, it only exists in our minds, right? We don't know if it really exists, right? There's no way for us to tell if it exists. Like, it, as a matter of perspective, if you just walk it back, like, all there is consciousness. And there's no way for us to know if we're in a dream right now. Like, think of when you're in a dream, that world's not real, right?
No.
And so I would imagine under this theory, our world is the same as that. Like, consciousness is all there is. And it's kind of like the idea of panpsychism, right? Where everything is consciousness. Like, consciousness is all there is. Like, the physical world isn't as we see it. And interestingly enough, when you look at quantum physics, right, as like, I'm obviously barely know anything about it, but what I do know is it gets freaking weird, dude. And it makes it seem like it's not real. Like, everything is freaking space, right? And like all these particles, and like, it's just weird. It's so, I don't know if it's real, right? And like I said, when I've done I've been on these psychedelic trips where I'm like, it seems like that. Like, you see the grid, you know, you're like, this is like a version of a hallucination or a version of something. And that's what makes me think maybe God as being consciousness and God being, that strength, both of those ideas are totally cohesive in my mind. Yeah, because absolutely. If being is if consciousness gives rise to reality and reality is being, then consciousness is being. Like, it's all the same. I don't know. It's so hard to explain, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. So let me take this another way, is that so there's some schools of Gnosticism, right? Which I talked about earlier. It's like when you're trying to salvation through knowledge, through having this epiphany where you're brought into the veil, closes off, and you see the real world for what it is. Right. And that's kind of what you're describing there, is where you're this world around me, it's fake, or not necessarily fake, but it's not the real world, right? And then when you peel it all apart, you find yourself in the real world, right? You find yourself in the kingdom of heaven, within God. And many early Gnostics and Gnostics today, they'll believe that the God from Genesis, the one who created the universe, it's not the same God as God the Father. The God from Genesis is what they call the demiurge, the maker in Greek, or the craftsman in Greek. And he's this evil being who created the material world and trapped us within it. And Jesus is the one that comes to help you transcend this world that we are trapped within and enter the real world, the world of the kingdom of heaven. So that's kind of like when I was hearing that, I was like, it sounded very familiar. Like, cause like when you see the Matrix, like for instance, the Matrix movie perfectly encapsulates what, like the idea of Gnosticism, where you're trapped in this fake world of appearances. Everything is appearances. And then you pull that apart, you enter the real world. And that really in our modern day, like not to get like, on a sociological perspective, but in the modern day, we're totally just trapped in appearances, you know, social media profiles. It's like, I want to appear better. Everyone's so focused about their metrics, right? Their stats, how they look, how they act, how they're perceived. But this perception it's fake. And you can transcend that and enter this place where we're all the same thing. We're all a part of that same thing, like consciousness, just like you're saying. And you can, and another thing, right? Like when I hear that story of, and like I haven't read most of the Old Testament, you know a lot more about it than me, but there's so many schools of thought where it's like, this book, the Old Testament, was written over like a couple thousand years, right?
I think so, yeah.
And
hard to know. Yeah.
It's like this isn't like one book, right? It's like a library of Israelite literature.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it's like, but when you get to the Gospels, like the New Testament, now that's like one book, right? It's written by different people, but it's a lot closer together.
Yeah.
Right?
No doubt.
And it's like, it's like there's almost this, Jesus comes in with this totally new understanding of what God is and what it can be in your life. And like, I'm not sure like how you take that in context of your thoughts here. Like do you think the understanding of God as consciousness, do you think that's still a thing before the New Testament, or do you think that's only a thing in the New Testament? Like as you were reading the Old Testament, were you thinking that too? Or
not quite as much, because okay. I was put onto that idea. So I didn't come up with that idea, right? I mean, there was inklings of that, and I've heard of panpsychism, like I've heard of that type of thing and whatever, but there, like I said, there's a growing movement of people who believe this way, and it's becoming popular online. So I like got hit with that wave on YouTube with these
like
people
left brain mystic
kind of thing. Pretty much. Well, I don't know. I don't know who that is.
Okay.
The dude that I first heard it from is a dude called Aaron Abke, and he's a bit sketchy. He's kind of like a modern day prophet kind of vibe. Okay. But anyways, super interesting dude. I don't want to shit on him, but I do get, I kind of like skeptical, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of seems like he kind of presents himself like a teacher, like he has all the answers kind of thing. But anyways, I was exposed to it by him. But so the thing with Jesus, and like you're asking, were you thinking this about the Old Testament, or were you thinking this only in the New Testament? What I imagine is that, like I said, I think the idea of God as a conscious bubble, right, of a pool of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have will per se, right? It's not necessarily, it's almost like how when you hook up electricity to shit, it wants to find the quickest way somewhere, right? It finds the quickest, least resistance, okay? Does it want to find the way of least resistance, right? No, but it acts as if it does because it has properties. And I think of God as the same way. It's like a phenomenon that has properties. And it seems like it wants shit, right? And it has certain outcomes, but it's just a phenomenon more than it is a conscious like thing. Anyways, what my guess is, when I talk about how I think we're all kind of like jacked into that, right? We're all feeding, our conscious experience is feeding that. Oh, this is also why when Jesus, like you were saying in the beginning of this, when Jesus says it's about what's in your mind. If you murder in your mind or whatever, it's the same, just as bad, because it's about conscious experience, right? It's not about the real world. It's about your experience. Anyways, sorry to keep going on that. My guess is, so we're all jacked into that somehow. My guess is, for whatever reason, Jesus, it was a two-way, right? It was a two-way. So that shit was coming into him. He had access to it consciously somehow. And maybe that's because he had something was with his brain. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe it was an accident. Who knows what metaphysically happened for there to be a hiccup like that. But he had connection to source in a way that no one else did. And I think that also explains why he didn't, in my opinion, communicate it necessarily that well, or like he didn't, he did less, in my opinion, than you would if you were God incarnate, right? Like if you were God incarnate, I would expect you to be doing more shit necessarily, right? Or like I wouldn't expect people to still be so freaking confused at this point in 2026. I'm still going, dude, I'm trying to think of what Jesus was doing and I can't even figure it out. It's like, could you make it more clear, please? But that's my guess about Jesus, and that idea is I think humans were lost, right? Humans were, because it's a phenomenon and God didn't tell anyone what's going on. It's this phenomenon that's happening. And then somehow a couple dudes, I bet the Buddha, certain people like this, and it's happened before, right? If you look at the Vedas and you look at Hindu type of their ideas, right? Like other humans in the past, I think, have found ways to like two-way street source and like get insights about what's going on, and Jesus was just one of them, and maybe came at the right time in history and had the right way of talking about what he experienced and what he thought, that it had lasting effects, maybe.
So are you familiar with the Baha'i faith?
Yes, a little bit. Is that what Rainn Wilson is? Rainn Wilson? Yeah, yep, I've heard of that.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like you're slightly talking about that, where it's this idea that that God sends messengers to earth, these people who are like a two-way street, just like you're saying, where they can see into the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven can see into them, right? And they can show that light to the world. I know sometimes when I pray, I say something along the lines of, God, please grant me the strength, like give me the light, put the light within me so that I may shine it and show the world. And I think of that in context of, I feel like everyone has this capacity to not have that two-way street, because like certainly I'll never be someone like that, right? As a mere mortal, as you will, right? But I feel like when people like that come along, they put that light into us, or they give us at least the ability to turn on a switch if we want to see the light, and it's like Jesus is someone who has that two-way street. And he installed the light switch, man. And he's telling people, hey, you can flick this on whenever you want to. Right. And it's like when I pray, like I want to be in the room where I have the choice to turn that light switch on. Or I want to be in the room where someone just turns that light switch on for me. Right. And I feel like with the Baha'i faith, or with any of these, it's like there are people, these very special, extraordinary people that come to earth, and they have the light and they shine it and they show it to the world and they put it inside of you. And I feel like that's kind of what you're describing. Like I'm not sure, but like from a Christian perspective, like you consider yourself Christian?
No.
I
mean, I have no idea, bro. I literally have no idea. I'm super interested and open-minded, but I wouldn't say I'm a cultural Christian. Like I think that the ideas of the Bible are good, and I live like a Christian for the most part, but like I wouldn't, it's hard to say, because when I think of a Christian, right, I think of the people in my family and like the people I was raised with, where you have to believe that Jesus died for your sins literally, and in heaven and hell, and like this whole thing. And like, I don't think dude really resurrected, and I don't think a lot of that stuff really happened. So a Christian, in my opinion, would say, well, then you're not on the team. And that's where I'm at.